Somewhere in a university archive, there is a report that cost taxpayers hundreds of thousands of dollars to produce. Scientists spent years compiling it. Governments distributed it to dozens of nations. It outlined a crop that could grow in the poorest soil on Earth, feed an entire family from a single vine, and do it without a single dollar spent on fertilizer. That report was published in 1975. In the 50 years since, the crop it described never made it to your grocery store. It never became a household name. It never received the research funding that its documented potential demanded. The question is not why that report was written. The question is why nothing followed. The plant is called Sophocarpus tetragonolobus. Most people know it, if they know it at all, as the winged bean. Today we are going to follow its trail, not from the angle of what it is, but from the angle of what it exposes about the way the food system decides what you eat and what quietly disappears. Let us start with the numbers, because the numbers are where the story breaks open. Mature winged bean seeds contain between 30 and 37% protein by dry weight. In some analyzed varieties, that figure reaches 45%. That protein content is remarkable. The amino acid composition is remarkably close to soybean, high in lysine, the essential amino acid that most plant proteins are famously deficient in. The fat content runs from 15 to 20%. Roughly 70% of that fat is unsaturated, mainly oleic and linoleic acids. That gives the oil a stability advantage over soybean oil, because winged bean oil contains significantly less linolenic acid, the component that causes oils to go rancid quickly. Compare this to soybean. The global soybean market was valued at over $200 billion in 2025. That market exists because soybean delivers dense protein and oil. The winged bean delivers both in comparable quantities, and unlike soybean, the winged bean does not stop at the seed. The tuberous roots, the underground portion of the plant, contain between 20 and 25% protein. That is not a misprint. The root of this plant has more protein per gram than almost any other underground food crop on Earth. In the Mandalay region of Myanmar and across Papua province in Indonesia, communities have eaten these tubers as a staple food for generations, precisely because of that density. The leaves, consumed as greens, carry 75% of the daily recommended vitamin C in a 100-gram serving, along with 270% of the recommended daily vitamin A. The flowers are edible. The young green pods are eaten like snap beans. One plant, 5 distinct food sources. Now let us talk about where this plant came from, because its history is the first clue about why it disappeared. The true wild ancestor of the winged bean remains scientifically uncertain. Published genetic research confirms the progenitor species is either extinct or has not been definitively identified. What genetic analysis has established is that the greatest diversity of the plant exists in Papua New Guinea and the surrounding Indonesian archipelago, which strongly suggests that region as its center of origin. Some researchers have proposed a secondary origin in Madagascar or East Africa, carried across the Indian Ocean through ancient trade networks, long before any colonial record existed. For hundreds of years, highland communities in Papua New Guinea grew this plant with deliberate agricultural intelligence. They rotated it with sweet potato crops to regenerate soil. They harvested and saved seeds across generations. They ate every part of the plant at different stages of growth. This was not accidental subsistence. This was sophisticated multi-use agriculture developed across centuries without any institutional support. The first time Western science formally noted the plant was in 1747, when the Dutch botanist Georg Eberhard Rumphius described seeing it on the island of Ambon in Indonesia. He recorded that locals told him it had arrived from further west, probably India or the Malay Peninsula. What is significant about that date is what it tells you. This plant was already so well traveled and so deeply embedded in indigenous agricultural systems that its origins were blurry even to the people growing it. For the next 2 centuries, it sat in botanical footnotes. Then in 1973, a British agronomist named G.B. Masefield wrote a detailed analysis of its nutritional and agricultural properties. In 1975, the United States National Academy of Sciences published the report that would briefly push the winged bean onto the world stage. Scientists called it the soybean of the tropics. Time magazine covered it. The Food and Agriculture Organization took notice. Experimental plantings were set up in over 50 countries. For a brief window, it genuinely looked like the winged bean was about to enter the mainstream. It did not. To understand why, you have to understand the specific technical challenges the plant presented and the specific institutional conditions that meant nobody solved those challenges. The first problem was photoperiod sensitivity. The winged bean evolved near the equator, where days and nights are roughly equal year-round. The plant needs a day length close to 12 hours to trigger flowering and tuber formation. Move it to a temperate latitude where summer days stretch to 14, 15, or 16 hours, and the plant grows vigorously but refuses to fruit. Agronomists trying to expand cultivation beyond the tropics hit this wall immediately. Low sensitivity varieties do exist. A Japanese variety called Uridun has been documented flowering at up to 14 hours in subtropical Ishigaki Island. But breeding work to systematically develop photoperiod-tolerant lines for a global range of latitudes was never adequately funded. The second problem was the anti-nutritional factors. Raw winged bean seeds contain trypsin inhibitors, phytic acid, tannins, and compounds that cause digestive discomfort if the beans are not properly prepared. This is not unusual. Soybeans have many of the same anti-nutritional compounds, and the global food industry solved that problem through industrial processing. What matters is that the solutions for winged bean are also well documented. Boiling completely eliminates trypsin inhibitors. Roasting destroys 99% of them. Soaking seeds in sodium bicarbonate solution reduces phytic acid by 30 to 40%. These are not exotic solutions. They are the same basic preparation steps that traditional communities were already using. But presenting a crop to industrial food systems without a ready-made, standardized processing pipeline creates institutional friction that most orphan crops never overcome. The third and perhaps most structurally significant problem was the growth habit. The winged bean is what botanists call indeterminate. It keeps growing, spreading, and vining indefinitely rather than maturing at a uniform, predictable time. That makes mechanical harvesting nearly impossible. Industrial agriculture is built around monocultures harvested by machine on a fixed calendar. A plant that fruits continuously over weeks and needs to be hand-picked does not fit that model, regardless of what it grows in or how much protein it contains. And here is where the story shifts from botany to economics. Funding for crop research is not allocated by nutritional need, it is allocated by commercial return. The Lugar Center at Purdue University documented this precisely. Because the global demand for orphan crops is limited, and because the primary sources of funding for plant genomics and agricultural improvement are rooted in the United States and Europe, research priority flows toward crops that serve those markets and generate financial returns for investors. The winged bean's home ground is the humid tropical belt, including sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia, and Papua New Guinea. These are not the markets that drive agribusiness investment decisions. A 2025 review published in the journal Legume Science put it clearly. Despite extensive documented benefits, the winged bean's mainstream adoption remains limited due to inadequate breeding programs, pest susceptibility, and a lack of standardized processing protocols. None of those obstacles are scientifically insurmountable. They are funding gaps. And funding gaps in agriculture are not random. They follow the logic of returns. Meanwhile, the soybean industry has had decades of coordinated research, industrial infrastructure, and government subsidy behind it. The global soybean market is projected to reach over $300 billion by 2034. That is not just the result of soy being nutritious, it is the result of a system that standardized soy, subsidized soy, and built international supply chains around soy. The winged bean never received any of that infrastructure investment. It was handed a report in 1975 and then largely left alone. The nitrogen story deserves its own space here because it is the part that most directly touches the economics of farming at the ground level. The winged bean, like all legumes, forms a symbiotic relationship with soil bacteria called rhizobia. These bacteria colonize nodules on the plant roots and convert atmospheric nitrogen, which makes up nearly 80% of the air around us, but is biologically inert to most organisms, into a form that plants can absorb and use. This is biological nitrogen fixation, and it means the winged bean effectively manufactures its own fertilizer from thin air. When the winged bean grows in a field, it leaves behind nitrogen-enriched soil that benefits the next crop grown in that same location. Traditional farmers in Papua New Guinea understood this intuitively, and modern soil science has confirmed and quantified it. The nitrogen does not disappear when you harvest the crop. It stays in the soil. The global synthetic nitrogen fertilizer market is worth over $200 billion annually. That market exists because modern agriculture has been deliberately designed around nitrogen dependency. Hybrid seeds bred to deliver high yields require high nitrogen inputs to perform. When farmers switch to those seeds, they commit to buying fertilizer every season. A crop that eliminates that need is not a product because it does not generate recurring revenue. It generates independence. The winged bean, along with other nitrogen-fixing legumes, could, in the words of researchers who have studied it, fundamentally restructure how we think about soil fertility in tropical agriculture. Not a minor adjustment, a structural redesign. Let us go back to the plant itself for a moment, because there is a dimension to this story that gets lost in the protein numbers and the economic arguments. The seeds of the winged bean contain meaningful quantities of calcium, iron, phosphorus, zinc, and copper. Iron content in 100 grams of fresh beans covers 19% of the daily recommended value. The B vitamin profile includes thiamine, riboflavin, niacin, and pyridoxine. The oil extracted from the seeds contains high levels of tocopherols, vitamin E, at concentrations that rival or exceed soybean and corn oils. Vitamin E is a fat-soluble antioxidant that also improves the body's ability to utilize vitamin A. Now consider where protein energy malnutrition is concentrated. A 2022 analysis published in Frontiers in Public Health documented the global burden. The highest rates are in sub-Saharan Africa and parts of South and Southeast Asia, precisely the tropical and subtropical regions where the winged bean grows without irrigation, without synthetic fertilizer, and without the soil preparation requirements of major commercial crops. The match between where the nutritional crisis exists and where this plant thrives is almost geometrically precise. What has global nutrition policy done about this? The answer is a patchwork of small research projects, germplasm banks holding seed collections that rarely translate into actual breeding programs, and occasional conference mentions. A 2024 paper in a CABI journal confirmed that limited attention to genomic study and germplasm characterization has directly blocked the development of improved winged bean varieties. The genetic diversity exists, the seeds are stored. The science is decades behind where it would be if anyone had followed through on what the 1975 report suggested. There is something else worth understanding about the way crops get written out of the mainstream. It has nothing to do with conspiracy and everything to do with invisible incentive structures. Research funding, development aid, seed system investment, and agricultural extension all flow through institutions. Those institutions respond to metrics. Metrics reward large-scale impact, which means they reward large-scale crops that already have infrastructure behind them. A breeder who improves soybean yield by 2% can publish in a high-impact journal and attract commercial interest. A breeder who spends a decade improving winged bean photoperiod tolerance is working on a crop with no commercial seed industry, no processing infrastructure, and no guaranteed buyer for any variety they develop. The career math does not work out in favor of orphan crops, regardless of how much nutritional potential those crops carry. This is not villainy. It is the compounding logic of a system that was built for scale. And the winged bean has been paying the price of that logic for 50 years. The 2025 paper from Frontiers in Nutrition put it with unusual directness. Orphan crops need public sector funding, complementary consumer education, and regulatory frameworks that reduce the cost of bringing non-transgenic, improved varieties to market. Without those conditions, nutritionally superior crops will continue to exist in germplasm banks and botanical footnotes, while the same handful of commodity crops expand to fill every available field. Here is what you can do with this knowledge. None of it requires waiting for the system to fix itself. The winged bean is not difficult to grow if you're in a tropical or subtropical climate. It needs heat, moisture, and long growing seasons. It performs best between roughly 23 degrees north and south latitude. It climbs readily on a trellis or fence. You plant the seed, inoculate the soil with rhizobium bacteria, which is available from garden suppliers and ensures proper nitrogen fixation, and the plant does most of the rest. The seeds you harvest can be dried and replanted. There is no proprietary trait, no patented variety, no requirement to buy inputs from anyone. If you live outside the tropics, the challenge is genuine. Photoperiod sensitive varieties will grow abundantly, but may not fruit in temperate summers. If you're in the subtropics, South India, Southeast Asia, Equatorial Africa, or Central America, the plant will work naturally. If you're in a temperate zone and want to experiment, look for low photoperiod sensitivity varieties, or grow the plant specifically for its leaves and tender shoots, which are harvestable throughout the growing season regardless of whether the plant flowers. From the seed, harvest young pods when they are tender and bright green. They cook like snap beans, stir-fried or steamed. The mature seeds can be boiled or roasted. The leaves can be cooked as you would any dark leafy green. The flowers are edible raw and can be scattered into salads where their mild flavor and striking appearance make them genuinely beautiful. If you manage to grow a plant long enough to develop tubers, those roots can be eaten fresh or boiled. The winged bean is not a secret. It never was. It was documented, evaluated, and publicized by some of the most respected scientific institutions in the world. What happened to it afterward was not a single decision. It was the accumulated weight of a food system that rewards scalable, controllable, industrially processable crops and quietly abandons everything else, no matter how nutritionally exceptional it is. The 2025 scientific review in the journal Legume Science calls the winged bean a one-species supermarket and a candidate for alternative food systems aimed at being resilient, nutritious, and environmentally sustainable. That language is careful academic language. What it means in plain terms is this: the plant works. It has always worked, and the distance between what it could do and what it is currently doing is not a gap in the science. It is a gap in the will. Every time a study gets published, every time a seed gets planted, every time a farmer in a tropical village keeps a variety alive that no corporate seed bank will fund to preserve, that gap closes a little. Not because any single person changed the system, but because knowledge, once distributed, does not stay buried. You now have that knowledge. Plant it where you can. Share it where you cannot. If this video added something real to what you understand about food, where it comes from, and who decides what reaches your plate, please hit like so this reaches someone who needs it. Leave a comment with your questions or your own experience growing this plant. And subscribe so you are here when we go deeper into the next crop the world forgot.